Yep. Just wanted to ask you a question. Put your hand out if you know Stoke Newington Town Hall.
Yeah.
Put your hand out if you've been inside it in the last 5 years. Oh, that's good. Great. Excellent. My name's Tim Walder. I now work for the Greater London Authority, but I used to work for Hackney Council for 8 years, from 2015 to 2022 as Conservation Officer. Council has a problem really with Stoke Newington Town Hall long term, which I'll come to more at the end. So they asked me to do a thing called an assessment of significance, which was basically an excuse to spend 2 weeks inside the building poking into absolutely every room and every cupboard and finding out all about the history and being paid for it. So it's absolutely marvellous. These rather good black and white photos are from historic England, and they're what's known professionally as tombstone photos, where when you've finished your building, you pay a professional photographer to photograph it in the architect's perfect state, which is finished but empty of people. And everything is looking absolutely marvellous. And they often seem to do it, you'll see on the later ones, that the windows open. And the reason the windows are open is they've just been painted, which is the last thing you do, and you can't shut them because they're still wet. So this is the council chamber, which is now where you get married, often. Unfortunately, all of that furniture is gone. The furniture was by Gillows, who were very smart, top of the range. So that's 1937. So I've got lots of very detailed notes. I may not do all of them. Before the town hall was built, what was there? Well, there was two things that was there. One was the manor house for Stoke Newington, which, like a lot of villages, the manor house was next to the church to keep kind of church and state together. The manor house dated from 1500 and had disappeared because it was knocked down in about 1695 to build a row of 11 houses, which were numbered 166 to 186. Numbers 182 to 186 were demolished for the library in 1892, but numbers 166 to 180 were still there in 1934, but they knocked them down for the town hall. I'm saying town hall. It's actually called Civic Centre, and that's not me being 60s. That's what it was called in 1937 when it was finished. It was called a Civic Centre because it wasn't just town hall. So when they were building the Civic Centre in 1934, they dug up the manor house, and there's actually quite a good record in Hackney Archives of lots of Tudor bricks, and you get quite a good picture of it being a really big Tudor house. And when you go in, I don't know if you've been in the modern entrance area, there's a little panel of bricks from the manor house in the wall with a little plaque from 1937 saying that they're from the manor house. That was actually outdoors originally because the current entrance area is modern, but now it's inside. It was obviously, Amir's slightly anticipating me here, it was the town hall of the London Borough of Stoke Newington, which was possibly the smallest borough in London. There had been a parish from the 17th century, and there was a vestry, which was like a parish meeting, which did some civil government functions. From 1899, there was a metropolitan borough with a population of about 50,000, and it was merged into Hackney and Shoreditch in 1965. It's quite an interesting borough because it claimed to be apolitical, and the councillors were non-party, but everyone said they were conservative in character. Although there was a bit of a switch in 1934, which is around the time the town hall was being built, where it actually became Labour 13, Independent 17, so a Labour minority, but heading that way. There's lots of plaques in the town hall to former aldermen and councillors. It's quite interesting that there's quite a good showing of Jewish surnames. So I think that it probably was a council with quite a noticeable sort of Jewish sort of element to it, which probably reflected the local population. Previous town hall in Milton Grove. Now, my first job in Hackney was to go and look at a listed building in Milton Grove to see about the windows. Don't blame me if you didn't get building consent for plastic windows. And there was a funny little road called Town Hall Approach. I thought, this is fun, let's go and look at the town hall. So I wandered around a bit, and there's nothing there. And I thought, well, it was sort of vanished. What's this all about? And it took me ages, talking to a colleague, to realise that there it was in Milton Grove, and it's long gone. That was demolished in 1961. The only thing that survives, apart from the foundation stone that Amir referred to, is some safes, and I found that safes, this is in the days when you paid your rates in cash, so there's a lot of cash sitting around in these buildings. you needed a big old metal safe, and these things tend to survive, and so the modern town hall has the safes from the old town hall, and they're not going anywhere because they're really difficult to move because they're so heavy. Church I used to go to, the entire church was killed by a V1, but the safe survived. So that's the safes. Okay, now there is a lurking scandal, which I kind of read between the lines in Hackney Archives. In 1931, Stoke Newington Council decided it was going to have a new town hall. That was partly the result of them getting lots of new powers. One of the shifts that everyone seems to forget was the Local Government Act of 1929, which was Neville Chamberlain, probably one of his better ideas. Got rid of the poor law, got rid of the workhouses, and this is the unwritten history of the NHS. Two things that people forget is that almost every hospital you go to probably was a workhouse, or the site was a workhouse, and some of them, lots of them, still have visible workhouse buildings like St Leonard's. Got rid of the workhouses, but they had lots of infirmaries and dispensaries and health-related activity going on. So they tended to become part of hospitals. Hospitals already existed, but were funded by charitable endeavours. There was lots of sort of parades and things. So basically, there was a kind of local government nationalisation of hospitals. It wasn't the NHS. It was just taking over hospital running and hospital funding into local government. So all of a sudden, you had to have a person called a Chief Medical Officer of Health who was in charge of quite a lot of activity. That meant you needed a load of money and a lot more office buildings. So a lot of the activity at Stoke Newington was to make sure you had somewhere to put the Chief Medical Officer of Health. And you had the same thing in Shoreditch, where there's a big early 30s wing at the back, which was all about health. They chose this site because it was next to the public library, which already existed, and an electricity substation, and they had a plan to make the substation bigger that never happened. In the 30s, there was a big shift with lots of boroughs building new town halls. They were all at it. In my article in Hackney History, I called it an arms race. Because basically these people were showing off like our town hall. And not least was Hackney Town Hall was being built between 1934 and 1937, so they were definitely looking down the road. And they used to invite each other. When they built a new town hall, they'd invite the neighbouring councillors from neighbouring boroughs and go, look what we've got. Ours is bigger than yours. And there was a bit of an arms race, and there's loads. And a lot of them have vanished because, you know, Hackney is made of 3 boroughs. That happened often. And places like Beckenham, for example, which is now in Bromley, had a fantastic town hall with the tower, which was demolished in the 80s from Marks and Spencer's. They also had a kind of idea of municipal socialism, kind of localised Keynesian economics, that between 1929 and 1933 there was a massive slump with the Wall Street crash and a building recession. So they wanted to build to provide local employment. And the Hackney Archives are fascinating because all these builders and furniture makers and joiners all wrote to the clerk to the council and said, give us a job. And it was interesting because he had his replies and he didn't say no. He used to employ people as security guards of the site, and then later on some of them got some of the jobs. So he didn't just dismiss them. He employed them as watchers, security guards of the site. The council decided it was going to build a new town hall in 1933, and they prepared a specification, which they got wrong. And they asked Sir Edwin Lutyens to be the judge. And Sir Edwin Lutyens is a really famous Edwardian architect, most famous for the cenotaph. And there was 24 applications. The person who won was called John Reginald Truelove. He didn't apply. His 24 wasn't him. So no one knows quite what happens, because all of a sudden Truelove won, and he hadn't even entered. And he also got a £250 prize. And you think, well, what's going on there then? And I think what probably happened was, these are some of the, this is Amir's. The one on the left, oh, look at it, is the town hall. That's what we got. These are some of the others. And you can see at the top, they're kind of like late 1920s, a bit neoclassical. They're fine. They're a bit bland. And I think Lutyens looked at them and thought, they're not that great. I know this guy called Truelove who used to work for me. I'll ring him up off the record and say, why don't you quickly shove in some drawings and do your best? And that's what happened. So Truelove won, and it was priced at, he got 6% of the build cost. It was priced at £96,750, 6 shillings and 4 pence, which if you do a kind of inflation-based thing is £6 million. In real terms, building the town hall wouldn't be £6 million, it would be much, much more than that. I had real trouble with Reginald Truelove because there's this circular thing where you look him up and people say, oh, Stoke Newington Town Hall is by Reginald Truelove. And you look at Reginald Truelove and say, he's really famous. He's the architect of Stoke Newington Town Hall. And it just goes round and round and round. And to be honest, Googling Truelove, fruitful but not in the right way. So eventually I had to dig around. He was born in 1886 in Sheffield. He was northern. He was described as tall and broad-shouldered by his local paper. He had quite a posh wife and 2 children, a boy and a girl. His parents were quite influential. His father was an alderman, so like a senior councillor, and he was apprenticed to some architects in Sheffield, and then he qualified at the Architectural Association schools in London. He had a gap year, kind of, well, actually a gap 3 years, where he went to France, India, China, Japan, Egypt, Canada, and the United States between 1908 and 1911, which seems like, yeah, I don't know what was going on there, but somebody funded him to wander around the world for 3 years. He was a bit of an artist as well as an architect. There is a book called The Ruins of Fountains Abbey, which is a picture book of the ruins, by the Reverend Arnold Whitaker Oxford, and he did all the pictures. And in the town hall, there's a panel which has been taken down, which has the arms of Stoke Newington, and it was painted by Truelove himself, and it's still loose in the events team's office. It should be hung up somewhere. His first building that I know of, and there's probably some others, is this, which is in Sheffield, and strangely enough, his father was the mayor and said, we need a new doss house. So this is a doss house in Sheffield for homeless men. It's still there, and it looks a bit Chicago, doesn't it? You can see he's been on holiday. Things got a bit more serious because the First World War came. Truelove does seem to have been quite a brave kind of guy because he enlisted voluntarily. He was in the London Regiment and he was wounded twice in 1915 and 1916 with something that the records that they used to write on your card, GSW. And you think, what's that? General shrapnel wounds, which included something in his right arm that stayed there and something in his head. So you do wonder what was going on with these people after the First World War, really. And he made an application for a disability pension, so he's probably partially disabled. He also went to Italy, and he retained the title of captain. In 1918, he married Anita Mary Lilliskold, who's described as a member of the Swedish nobility. And she seems to have been quite wearing the trousers, actually. And they lived in Sheffield in 1921. His main job after the war was as an architect, working with the team for what was then called the Imperial War Graves Commission, is now called the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, building all of the cemeteries and memorials in northern France and Belgium for people who died or gone missing in the First World War. So he worked with Sir Edwin Lutyens and other people who are quite well known, Sir Herbert Baker, Sir Reginald Blomfield, and he designed 29 cemeteries, including the one on the left, which is called Vison-Artois. And there's some quite major cemeteries by him, and it's possible that there's more, because sometimes the juniors, when he was one of the juniors, designed them, and then one of the seniors signed it off and kind of took the credit on the card. He's in this picture. Do you know who that is? Well, that's George V. There was a thing in the early 20s, before all these memorials were built, because this took, well into the early 30s, to go on a kind of pilgrimage to northern France to sort of visit the grave of your relative who died. And quite a lot of British families did that. And the King did it in 1922, but also to sort of G up the construction project. So this is him with various architects. Reginald Truelove is this guy looking the wrong way. So he seems to be a slightly awkward kind of character. So they got on with building the town hall. They started in 1934 and they'd finished by 1937. These pictures are when it was brand new, looking absolutely fabulous, actually. And you can really see the kind of Assembly Hall, the influence of their kind of neoclassical memorials that was going on. but a more kind of Art Deco feel to the town hall. There's a number of oddities to the buildings. There's a building, you've probably never seen it, there's a thing called the Reference Library, which is part of the library not open to the public, because it's now a book stack for the mobile library service. It's a fabulous room. It was built as a public reference library. That was a kind of extension to the library, and there was some kind of funny business with money with the Ministry of Health to pay for that. Originally, there was no junction between the town hall bit and the assembly hall, and that's because the councillors thought, we won't pay for the assembly hall because we're not sure if we've got the money, so we'll leave that for later and maybe build it later. And then they changed their mind and built it all in one go. So originally there was no join, and even now the joins are a bit funny. There's a couple of doorways at ground and first floor. The first floor one's locked. So it was designed as two separate buildings, and you can see that. They also slightly messed up on the brief because they forgot the front railings and the front gate piers and the front gates and the car parking bit at the front. And that cost an extra 136,000. And then they panicked a bit about money. I mean, so there's a bit of a thread here, dithering, panicking about money by councillors. He wanted all kinds of high-tech things inside, and a lot of them got cost engineered out. Now, Amir sent me some photos of the opening ceremony, which I'd read about but not actually seen. So on the left is an invitation. It was all very posh. And then on the right's a photo of the opening ceremony. That's the balcony from the mayor's parlour with a whole load of soldiers with trumpets. And then there's all kinds of people wearing lots of fur and chains of office, and there were carriages. It seems to have been a real kind of pompous thing. 27th of September 1937, they gave all the children of Stoke Newington, all of them, the day off. And there was a procession of mounted police and dignitaries wearing chains of office, and they were all in horse-drawn carriages, and they made speeches using radio amplification, and there was a ceremonial opening of the main doors. And the ceremonial opening of the main doors involved Truelove handing the Lord Mayor of London a new gold key. And the Lord Mayor of London unlocked the doors with the gold key. I don't know where this gold key's gone, I've never seen it. And at that moment, the soldiers blew their trumpets. And then there was a procession through the building where they all walked through the building with a mace bearer at the front. And then the whole building was blessed by the rector of Stoke Newington, and they all made speeches in the assembly hall. And there were two kinds of tickets. There was a pink one and a white one, and I think the white one was the ordinary one. So the pink one was if you're a proper, the white one is if you're council staff. If you were proper, you got jazz with Jerome Kern, and proper refreshments probably involving possibly beer or wine, I don't know. If you were council staff, you got tea from an urn in the rear yard. And actually, the building was quite widely publicised in the contemporary press. It's in Building News and Architectural Digest and other places. It's really three buildings. This funny thing that I always say is pizza-shaped is really the town hall and the kind of offices. And then there's a kind of gap, which was a yard. And when you go in now, you go in here. And the entrance area with the foyer is modern, and it's in that gap with the yard. They did some changes in about 2010-ish. But originally, that was just where the staff took their bikes to go out the back, in a gap between the two buildings. And this is the assembly hall here. And this is the reference library, which is kind of part of that building. And then there's some other bits of library which were part of it. There's a sort of hall at the back, which is now the bar to the assembly hall. And then all this stuff here at a different angle is the library from 1892. It's the Stoke Newington Library. And then there's a funny junction where they join together. So there's a kind of political ceremonial route, which is slightly odd because it's curved. And the entrance, the ceremonial entrance, is not in the most obvious place. It's kind of round the curve, round the side of the church. And the thinking behind that was unusual, partly to get some committee rooms away from the main road, but I think also to get a nice Art Deco curve. The other issue they had was it's really, really deep, so you have these two funny light wells. Ceremonial route, you go in here, and you go, all the political stuff was on the first floor, so you go up the stairs. Stairs are known as an imperial staircase, copied off the Opera Garnier in Paris. So the idea of an imperial staircase is you go up the middle, there's a landing, it splits in half and it becomes two staircases and there's another landing, so you have a really grand approach. and then all the political stuff's at first floor. On the ground floor, it's basically offices. It was the medical officer of health on the bottom right, and then I think the engineer on the left. I'll go to the first floor because that's the political stuff. So you go up the stairs and straight ahead you're going into the council chamber. There's two little rooms on the left and right as you approach the chamber, and they were kind of retiring rooms. You're up the stairs. This is called an anteroom. It's really a landing. And then you've got a men's room and a women's room. These are for councillors. It's not quite clear what they're for, but it seems to be if things go on a bit and you need to powder your nose or have a bit of a break, or possibly a smoke. And they were different. They were painted different colours, and the ladies had a more delicate form of plaster decoration. The men's was blue with square corners and bolder rectilinear plasterwork, and the female members' room was painted green with rounded corners and a more delicate and curvaceous plasterwork scheme. That all survives. They're now the bride and groom's rooms, so they're in quite good condition. Right, entrances are really interesting. So this is ceremonial stroke political entrance up towards the first floor. There was then a sort of staff entrance where you went in here, and there's a nice staircase that goes towards the first floor. That has a lot of memorials on it, and I think it was probably more of an everyday councillor's entrance. But then there was a route for the public, quite a complicated route, where you went in here, and you go along this corridor to here. And this is where it all happened on the ground floor, because there was two people who really mattered. You had all kinds of other people, like borough engineer and medical officer's health. There's two people that mattered. Town clerk, who's like a chief executive, and the treasurer. And the treasurer collects the rates. So what happens in here is you went along here and there was a counter where you handed over your rates in cash. And there was a kind of lift here that went down to the basement, like a dumbwaiter that took all the cash into the safes in the basement. So you could go all the way through and then out here. Now, Truelove had two little cunning plans with this route. One was that you had a bit of security, so you had a porter's room here and a porter's room here, so you keep an eye on who's coming and going. And then he knew that lots of members of the public would come this way to go to the treasurer's office. So there's a particularly wide vestibule, which was designed for one specific purpose, which was for ladies to put their prams in while they paid their rates. And he designed these funny little gaps in the entrance so that the prams would just fit and be out of the way. This bit's sort of mainly kind of a staff entrance, and the stairs here are very sort of plain. These are the light wells that I was talking about. And this is Medical Office of Health here, and this is a borough engineer going all around there. I mean, it's not used in this way now. Is this first floor? Yeah, first floor. Mayor's parlour with a balcony, presumably so you could have trumpets or greet your grateful electorate. I mean, Hackney's got a balcony as well on its town hall. And then there was a little room where if the mayor got a bit bored of the public talking to him, he could just sort of hide, a retiring room. And I love the politics of this is that the next door one is the town clerk, so the chief executive's room, so he can just nip in and talk to the mayor anytime and whisper in his ear. And then the town clerk has all kinds of officey people. And then the fun bit, which is a great room, there's a picture later, is there's 3 committee rooms, and they had these folding doors. So it's a very funny curved room. If you stand one end, you can hardly see the other. And it could be one giant room, or it could be 3 separate rooms with these folding doors. And it had this really odd staircase, which was a real surprise for me. It took me a while to work it out. There's a dumb waiter for bringing sort of, I don't know, food maybe. Probably food. The staircase goes up to a second floor terrace above here, which has a big wall and just a terrace with a railing and nothing. And you think, well, what's that for? And it was a garden, it was a roof garden. And Truelove said, oh, it's so that at certain points in meetings, members might like to sort of take a little break. And what he meant was smoke, I think. Smoke and chat. Didn't last long, but there is a picture of it in 1938. The other thing that's going on with entrances, I'll just go quickly back to the other one. Staff entrance here, really lower staff at the back by the oil tank, and you went down this crazy little triangular staircase, and then there was various things in the basement, mainly storage. But the other one that was a bit odd was this one. There's a door on the right-hand side at the back on the Lordship Terrace side, and it goes up 2 stories, and then a corridor at second floor goes along to about here. And there's a caretaker's flat, which is in the second floor, all the way along here. And it's a three-bedroom flat with a curved corridor where you go along the corridor and there's this 3 bedrooms. And it must have been really fun if you had a toddler, because you wouldn't be able to see them running in the corridor from one end to the other. And I think the main function was so that the caretaker could put the flag up from his sitting room, which was just above here. And it has a rubbish chute, and I don't know where the rubbish chute goes, but the caretaker's wife, or actually the caretaker would be putting the rubbish out, could throw the rubbish down the chute, and it went down 2 floors somewhere. And there was some kind of entry phone, because this is a really long way from ground floor to the flat, is up and along and round. And there's also a washing line. So it's really quite bizarre. You could live on the premises.
Are you okay for time? Okay.
I move on. Okay, this is committee rooms 1, 2, and 3 with the original furniture, and sadly it's all gone. That's it, all open. This is the imperial staircase with silvered bronze. I haven't talked about all the paintings and the plaques, but there is lots of really fabulous elements around there. And then talking in terms of interiors, I guess you know the assembly hall. It's interesting because I thought, theatre, is there an organ? There's no organ. What was going on, it was described as a general utility hall for public meetings, concerts, lectures, and stage plays. It's not great for stage plays because the wings are a bit shallow. And there's no organ because in the ceiling there were loudspeakers for a radio to play dance music. And it was mainly intended and designed for ballroom dancing. So it has a Canadian maple sprung floor, which is lockable. There's a big lever. And if you don't want it bouncing when you're not dancing, you can lock it, and apparently it still works. I'm not quite sure how it works, but it does. And you can lock it in a solid position. One of the things that's quite interesting with the Assembly Hall and the Council Chamber is this was the glory days of the British Empire. And one of the ideas was you bound the empire together by sharing, well, not sharing, acquiring products of empire and incorporating them into your building in a symbolic way. So there's deliberately Australian wood, Canadian wood, South African wood in the chamber, and there's deliberately Canadian maple on the floor. So it was part of this kind of solidity, sort of unity of empire that you showed you're all together. And there was a thing called imperial preference, and also some very good woods coming from those countries. I think Canadian maple is probably the best. It seated 616 people sitting down, and the original colour scheme of the curtains was 3 shades of cream with mulberry and rose curtains. Oh, sorry, the building was 3 shades of cream, mulberry and rose curtains with an astringent accent of creme de menthe. Which doesn't survive and sounds really quite hideous to me. There's some fun bits out the back that you won't have seen. The stage is slightly sloped, which is slightly unnerving if you're not ready for it. And under the stage, there's a series of artiste dressing rooms and toilets. There's a balcony for 144 people. There's a little fly tower. And then there's a very strange world beneath everything of chair stalls where various chairs can be stored. There's one more bit of gossip. Sorry, information. My favourite bit was this bit here. Did anybody get married in Stoke Newington Town Hall? Hurrah. You might have been this room. It was at the back, and it was the registry office. And it was very plain in 1937. They said, oh, when we get the money, we're going to make it more attractive. I don't know if that ever happened. But one of the oddities about the building is when you go up these stairs, there's a really big landing. And when you're there, you think, why is it so big? It's just a landing. It's enormous. And that's because like the weddings were kind of one after the other, a bit like a crematorium where they're packed together. And not in any other way like a crematorium. That was so the next group waiting to get married could stand around on the landing while they waited, which is an amazingly sympathetic bit of provision, really. We thought of everything in 1937. Okay, this on the right is the reference library, which is a fantastic room and should be open to the public. There's no two ways about it. It's currently a bookstore and the public don't get to see it. It's double height. It's got a wonderful Art Deco roof light. It's got these metal shelves. It's very cluttered. It's hard to see in the pictures, but the metal shelves have got the original green paint. The door that says library that isn't used anymore had a little hallway, and there was the arms of the borough in bronze as you went in, and it's all just fabulous. And basically, under all the clutter and stuff, it's all 1937, and it would make a terrific public room. Right, World War II. Now, this building was finished in 1937. By 1938, people were starting to think about the war, which they knew was coming, even if they didn't tell people. So there was quite a lot of goings-on with the war. In the basement, under the Treasurer's office, there was a series of storage rooms, and the first thing they did was put loads of beams in. There's this very strange steels, where there's a giant steel and then another steel above it, so there's two lots of steels going different directions. And that was to reinforce the ceiling, so that if the town hall was bombed, that room was supposedly bomb-proof. And that was an ARP station. And the other thing that they did in 1938 was they camouflaged the building. I have thoughts about this. It is mentioned in, it's a grade 2 listed building, it's mentioned in the listing because it's quite unusual that the camouflaging survives. And if you stand and look at the front on a sunny day, you can see it. It is fading away. It tends to survive a bit better where it's sort of sheltered from the rain. It seems to be sort of washing off. But you can see it, and it was clearly sort of brown, black, patches of white with very irregular shapes over the entire building, including all the stonework and everything. This is a picture of the back part of the roof area, and it survives a bit better there, it's a bit more sheltered. And I thought about that, and I thought, well, if you're a German bomber flying through the air, you're looking down, you're going to see this giant town hall. The fact it's been painted with camouflage paint isn't really going to make much difference. So I had wondered if they covered it in kind of camouflage netting or something to sort of obscure the outline, but it doesn't seem like they did. So my thinking is, it was a thing. Do you know the Stormont buildings in Northern Ireland? You're on TV, there's a fantastic drive and there's an amazing white building. They did it too. This is paint. Stormont was done, let me get this right. There was a mixture of paint and cow poo over the entire building. No, worse than that, it wasn't paint, it was tar and cow poo. So really sticky and nasty. So it all went brown. And they have got it off the front, but apparently there's bits lurking where they had real trouble getting it off, and they had trouble getting it off without damaging the stone. And it's kind of notorious that the whole of Stormont, which was fairly new as well, is covered in cow poo. So, yeah. My theory is, in 1938, the council was all about telling people, get ready, start growing stuff, start thinking about bomb shelters, just psychologically get ready for a really serious war. And part of that was showing that as a council, you were doing your bit. And if that meant sacrificing your nice new town hall by covering it in paint, they were prepared to do it. There are various war memorials in the town hall. I mean, this is quite a big one in the Treasurer's office to just the people in the Treasurer's department who died. So it obviously hit quite hard. Oh, I thought I had another slide. That's a shame. Okay. There's quite interesting psychology around the war, because war preparations of 1938 were the Civil Defence Act, and that was the whole kind of Home Guard, all that stuff. And then when the war ended in 1946, they kind of thought, it's all over, we don't need this anymore. And then the Cold War happened and the beginnings of kind of nuclear standoff. And so the Civil Defence Act actually came back in 1949, having been abolished. So there were 3 years with nothing, and then it was like, okay, we've got a different threat here. So what happened at Stoke Newington, it didn't have a bunker. Hackney had a Second World War bunker that's in the car park, still there. It didn't have one, but in 1953 they decided they were going to have a Cold War bunker. And it had to be better than Hackney's, which was very wet, it floods. And so theirs was bigger. It's out the back on the Lordship Terrace side. You can see the start of it. There's a kind of concrete head of the staircase, and then it goes down. And basically there's 8 rooms. There's 4 large rooms and 4 little rooms, more or less arranged in a line underground. The way the large rooms work is, first one appears to be a communications room. There's then a room that probably had women with telephones or something. There's a little bit of furniture. And then there was a command room. And then the end room has various services. And then the other 4 rooms are kitchenettes and 2 toilets. And you can just about see that, although there's an awful lot of stuff down there. So the idea was there might be a nuclear war. It was survivable, was the thinking at the time, if you made the right preparations. And therefore, the councillors and senior officers of Stoke Newington needed somewhere to command Stoke Newington after a nuclear war, and they could stay down there. And once the nuclear dust had settled, they'd be able to come out and take control of Stoke Newington again. You can tell I used to be in C&D, can't you? So, interesting stuff survives. The thing on the left-hand thing, and I don't imagine this works, but it's still there. It's got a bit damp over there. Is a VHF, very advanced VHF receiver, which would have received radio signals. And the machine on the right is a teleprinter, which would have typed out, so probably Morse, I would assume, or some other code. And then it typed out the message, which presumably says, you know, Russia have fired all their bombs, get your heads down. And these things also came with an escape hatch, so that if the main entrance was blocked, you had a way of getting out of the escape hatch. The other thing that I love so much, at the end room, there is an empty room with a very large diesel engine in it. And this is the diesel engine with a big tank, well, a moderate-sized tank of diesel. And what it was for was you cranked it up with a handle. Nice bit of asbestos here, by the way, just in case. You cranked it up with a handle. The engine ran some dynamos, which ran some fans. The fans sucked the air from outside, filtered the air of nuclear dust, and then blew it around the bunker. Hackney had something similar, but Hackney's was only powered by 2 bicycles attached to the floor. But Stoke Newington went one better. And I had 2 thoughts about this. One is the filters on the air filters were asbestos, so your long-term problems were. And the other was that the tank of diesel is only about sort of 3 gallons, and you think, well, how long does a nuclear winter last? Because you might have run out of diesel by the time we get to the end. Okay, intervening years. This is just showing changes done by Hawkins Brown Architects in 2010. Good scheme. Did up the chamber to make it the marriage room, did up the assembly hall, did up a lot of the kind of public areas, entrance areas, created a new common entrance. That was where you used to take your bikes in, and that kind of made it more coherent. Disabled access, all good. Sorry, should have done it in the wrong way. This building is 1961 out at the back, and it used to say Stoke Newington Civil Defence, and it was the sort of fag end of Civil Defence. It's not a terribly exciting office building, but it was the Civil Defence headquarters. And the bunker, you can just see the entrance to the bunker there. What that scheme didn't do was sort out the outside of the building, including the roofs and lots of non-public areas. Now, what's going on? When I was working for the council, I was involved in preparing this document, which is a sort of planning document where people in Stoke Newington and elsewhere asked, what do you want to do with Stoke Newington Town Hall? Because council's long-term aim is to get all of the council staff around Hackney Town Hall and Hackney Service Centre. So it's gradually becoming redundant. I believe that the only people who work in the town hall now are the CCTV people in the basement. I don't think any of the rest of it is used. So there's a lot of redundant office space. I mean, when I looked at it in 2016, it was mainly empty, but I think it's got more empty since. During COVID, the Assembly Hall ceiling started to fall down. And I helped the people in property come up with a scheme to fix it, because it is fixable. That was costed at £389,000. Complicated by the fact the ceiling is partly made of asbestos. Didn't help. The other issue is that the roofs are leaking. When I first visited it in 2014, it was leaking a bit. It's leaking more now. So it's not looking great. I mean, it's a problem across London that there are slightly too many town halls, and quite a lot. 1 in 3 is probably redundant. Hackney's not alone in having this issue, but I suppose I would say Stoke Newington Town Hall is probably in trouble, and it needs a new use. My personal view, it's just a personal view, council doesn't need it, council has no use for it, council doesn't have the money to fix it because all councils are broke. If I were them, I'd sell it, and I'd probably convert it to a hotel, because you've got a function room, you've got a place to get married, and you've got a lot of space that could be rooms. That might not be popular, but I think that could work in terms of preserving the building, but obviously you'd lose all the public functions. But yeah, it's a problem. Thank you.
Wow. That was excellent.